Hey folks, Quilly here, and welcome to the ultimate list of things that Civilization 7 doesn't tell you. This is not my Reddit post. This was posted by JordiTK and was modified and helped by other people in the Reddit comments. I saw this post yesterday and I thought right away, wow, I should make a video highlighting this, but I had a live stream, which is why I'm only doing this today. But the advantage is this has gotten some more updates and tweaks in the meantime, which has been lovely. One of the things we've talked about is that the Civilopedia, and in fact some of the tooltips in Civ 7, don't have all the information and details that we would like to see. There's some things that are missing in there that are quite important to play. There are some of these things in this document I have noticed and talked about in some of my videos. Some of them are things that you guys have noticed and told me about, which was really handy. And there's some other stuff in here that none of us may have known yet, or at least we've gotten some very useful and explicit clarifications about, which I'm excited. So I'm going to go ahead and read through this post and add my own commentary as we go. So first, ages, and we're going to talk about military first. Siege units and naval units are always lost at the end of the first age. You will receive a free cog at the start of the second age, exploration, once you spent your legacy points. So the free cog is pretty obvious. Losing the siege and naval units may or may not have been obvious to you guys, but that gets lost. Now that's only the end of the first age, so going from antiquity to exploration. Afterwards, you can retain naval units going from exploration to the modern age if you have fleet commanders. You'll keep as many naval units as can be assigned to your fleet commanders. Now, this is very similar to how the armies work, the land units. So by default, when you transition from one age to another, what happens is all of your army commanders, which can fit by default 4 units in them, possibly get upgraded to 6, will get as many military units stuffed inside of them as possible. For example, let's say you have 3 army commanders that they have 4 slots each by default. That means 12 land units will be carried over into the next era inside of commanders. In addition to that, you do keep a total of 6 or 9 base land units on top of whatever can fit inside of the commander. So for example, in the example with 3 army commanders going from antiquity into exploration, you will get 6 plus 12 for a total of 18 units that you can carry over into the next era. If you have more than that, then they will be pruned and trimmed down. I didn't realize, because I don't know if I've done an age transition with fewer units than that, but apparently if you have fewer than 6 or 9 land units at the end of the age, you will receive the deficit as free infantry units at the start of the next one. This actually might be super relevant for the AI that you've beaten down to almost nothing and then transition. They will have some units at the start of the next age, which is one of the things that is aiding to Civ 7's sort of overall stability and somewhat reset between the ages, and arguably maybe a little bit of a catch-up mechanism, which is really good for gameplay. It's not much of a catch-up, but just enough so that they don't get insta-stomped at the start of the next era, which is kind of nice to see. Yeah, should you have more units that can be kept at the age, excess units are deleted, and they will prioritize more populous settlements, which we certainly have noticed. Okay, other things that have to do with ages and age transitions. This is actually new. This block about city-states is new as of, I think, patch 3. Originally, on release, all independent people, whether as a village or as a city-state, would disappear and get completely reset at the start of the next age. And then again, I think it was patch 3, they made it that city-states. So city-states are independent people that have been elevated all the way from the village stage to city-state era by befriending them. When you max out the befriend meter, they turn into a city-state. And then when they still disappear at the start of an age, however, on the second turn, so the first turn of a new age is kind of a blank slate. On the second turn of the new age, new independent people with new names will spawn in the location where each one of those city-states will be. They will reset themselves as just a village and will have to be re-befriended, but it does mean that if there is a city-state, you can guarantee an independent people will spawn in the same place. I, for one, think this is an excellent change that they did, because it guarantees that if you really want to play a diplomatic game, you'll still have people to be diplomatic about. You do lose the city-state that you were the suzerain of, but it gives you the opportunity to get whole new city-state bonuses, and the city-state bonuses do vary by age, so it's a valid reset, I think. In addition to that, even if something wasn't a city-state, other independent villages will also spawn to fill empty areas in the map as well. So the independent people of the new age will not be restricted only to what was a city-state, but it guarantees you'll get one where there was a city-state. If you do incorporate the city-state into your empire, where it becomes an actual settlement of your empire, then you do get to keep it throughout the ages, right? Incorporating is different from just befriending. This is a very useful number and something that we were a little bit unsure about, even on the most recent live streams. We weren't entirely sure what the retention of gold and influence was through the ages. It was clear that some got retained, but not infinite amounts, and I didn't know the math behind it. Well, it turns out, apparently, you retain up to 3,000 gold and 250 influence at the start of New Age. So anything more than that gets lost, spend it if you can. And then also, and this is part of what made the math slightly harder to follow, you also gain 1 free turn of gold and influence equal to the income you'll have at the start of the current turn. This is not the income that you necessarily had in the previous age, because some of these numbers will change going into the New Age because of buildings becoming obsolete and things like that. So, but you'll still get 1 turn of free income at the start of an age, in addition to some amount that you carry over. I don't think there's necessarily a good instantaneous influence dump, because most of the things with influence are something that happens over a series of turns. So like if you're on the final turn of the exploration age and you have more than 250 influence, I don't know if there's a really good like, oh, let me just spend it to get bonus blah right away. It's more like, well, I would have wanted to spend it maybe 10 turns ago to be more efficient. But the gold definitely, because you can go on a building buying spree, or maybe even a unit buying spree if you don't have enough units to carry through to your maximum, which is really good to know. Now, speaking of buildings you might buy, one of the things is at the end of an age, if you're looking to construct a building or perhaps purchase a buildings, which ones might you want to do to carry over into the next era? Because of course, one of the things that happens to buildings through the next age is they become semi-obsolete. They become worse. They lose some of their value. But exactly how much? Well, first of all, obviously, ageless buildings stay exactly the same. So we don't have to worry about ageless buildings. Non-ageless buildings, sort of normal buildings, the bulk of your buildings, will lose their adjacency bonus, and their flat static bonus will just be either a flat +2 if they're antiquity buildings, or a flat +3 from the exploration age. Now, what's interesting about this is if a building does produce more than one resource, let's say a building produces both gold and influence, they will produce 2 gold and 2 influence. So if you're looking for something to dump money on near the end of the age, look for things that produce more than 1 value as a base, because that will be retained. Not only that, apparently, it will get brought up to this, not so much the +2 doesn't really matter, but the +3 part for exploration age buildings will be brought up to that. So this example in this post is that the guild hall, which normally produces 2 influence per turn, will actually be changed to do a +3 influence per turn. That's really fascinating. And this is a particularly good note, influence is the scarcest resource, and in particular, most buildings that produce influence just produce like a couple of influence, and I don't know if they generally get influence from adjacency, for example, right? The buildings that generate influence just tend to generate a flat amount. So they are actually really strong candidates to bring into the next era, and are actually really strong candidates for being the last thing you overbuild, if you ever overbuild them, because if they retain their static influence production, that's not bad. Every city except your capital will become a town. That's pretty clear, and we can see that. This is something I didn't know. You are given the option to move your capital to one of 2 different settlements. Yep, okay, I knew that, but I have never done it because I was always, you know what, I like my starting capital to be my capital throughout the game. That feels good. But apparently, it says here, effectively allowing you to start the age with 2 cities. So what this says to me is your previous capital, going into New Age, stays as a city, doesn't get reset down to a town. But if you move your capital, the new settlement also becomes a city, but you don't lose the city status of your old capital. That I didn't know, and that's quite good, because that'll save you a couple hundred gold at the start of an era to get more cities. That's really neat and not something I realized. So I'm going to be keeping an eye out for that, and maybe much more likely to move my capital around from age to age at this point. Your settlement limit starts at 4 in antiquity and increases by 4 at the start of each age. So 4, 8, and then 12 in the modern era. This is in addition to the increments from research techs or studied civics, as well as your leader attributes. And in particular, in the next section over here, it's explicitly stated that anything from the tech or civic tree other than settlement limit increases and the unique tradition policy cards will not carry over to the next age. I was pretty confident that this was the case and had said so in my videos and live streams, but I didn't say so with confidence. And it's useful. And again, I suspected, but it wasn't especially and explicitly clear to me that the settlement limit increases must also be retained, because nothing else kind of made sense based on how things go. So it's nice to see this explicitly written out. So it does mean that as you approach the end of an era, and let's say you aren't able to complete a full tech tree or a full civic tree, right? You're not able to get to the point where you're just researching the future tech over and over. What you want to prioritize is any of them that might give you a settlement limit increase, because that does get retained going forward. And it would have to be, because it would be silly if, for example, you got enough of these settlement limit increases to settle, I don't know, some number of settlements, right? Like 15 settlements. And then you go into the modern age and it resets your limit down to 12. That would be tragically bad. So it does seem pretty obvious that you must need to retain this. But the other things don't carry it over. We do know about the unique tradition policies. These are from the civic researches that are specific to your civilization. Those policy cards do get retained from age to age. That I think has been pretty obvious, but it's good to spell it out. Science and culture, therefore, have limited impact in the first two ages compared to other yields, and even the third age, culture specifically, is inconsequential, as you can achieve cultural victory without ever studying a civic past natural history. That's true and kind of funny, which is one of the first modern ages. Although, don't you, for the cultural victory, wouldn't you also need hegemony to be able to unearth the next tier of relics? So I don't know if that's entirely accurate, although I suppose maybe you could still get enough artifacts otherwise. I guess, yeah, you could. Anyway, all civilian units, except for commanders, are lost upon heading to an age. This includes civilization unique civilians. So your great people, right, would get lost. Settlers do get lost. Scouts do as well. But settlers is kind of a big one, right? If you aren't able to plop down a settlement with your settler before an age transition, then you do lose the settler, which definitely kind of sucks. Unique abilities of previous civilizations are lost. However, all unique improvements and buildings remain intact, including improvements gained from city-states. And that is pretty clear, because I think all the unique improvements do explicitly say that they are ageless in their text. But it is worth pointing out, legacy points not spent at the start of a new age are lost. It's currently not possible to see which legacies you have chosen. Policies. Some civilizations gain bonuses for the use of transitions. These are the only policy cards that remain available between the ages and have a noticeable feather icon in the policy menu. Traditions are unique to each civilization and are unlocked in their own civic tree. Ideologies are chosen in the third age, also in their unique civic trees. You may only unlock a single ideology of the 3 given options, and this cannot be changed later. Although each ideology has different benefits, entirely possible to finish the age without ever choosing one, and this may in fact save you from neighbors who would have become angry at you for ideological differences. I never actually considered just not researching an ideology. I mean, admittedly, we haven't played that many games yet. And the first tier of the ideologies civics do seem to be very strong generally. A lot of times I don't particularly care for the next couple, because a lot of times it's just unlocking some new policies that may or may not be running. But generally speaking, that first level is really nice. So I have a hard time believing that I would often issue an ideology completely, but it is an interesting idea to perhaps do it for diplomatic purposes. Commanders can't outright die. They will recover after several turns when killed. I don't like this several turns. I don't have the specific details for when they come back. I have seen them come back. I just don't know when. I'm also not sure that if they die, and I think if you have then an age transition, I'm not sure they return after the age transition. In fact, I'm pretty sure from one of my games where I did lose commanders late in an age that they did not return in the next age. So that's worth noting. Commanders can have 6 units assigned to them once they've unlocked the regiment skill in their logistics tree. Yep. That hasn't really happened to me yet, because I do tend to prioritize the offense and defense trees more than logistics, although there's great stuff in logistics. But yeah, units unpacked from commanders have no movement points left unless the commander has the initiative skill in their salt tree. This is actually the first skill I always get, because I really want my units to be able to move and attack on the turn they get unpacked. Land units can even be unpacked in water tiles without their usual movement costs or embarking. That's quite cool. Outside of war, commanders can be placed on any city hall or palace to reduce unhappiness and settlement by 10%, plus another 10% for each promotion. That I did not realize. The commanders do have various promotions that do give boosts if they are stationed in districts, for example. So you can build a commander in such a way that it actually is quite good to just park inside of a town. I didn't realize that it always reduced unhappiness. That's really good. War support does not grant any benefits, but instead penalizes the opponent. They lose -1 strength on all units per negative points, as well as 3, 5, 7 happiness, respectively, in settlements that they own that they have founded themselves, those founded by someone else they're not at war with, and those founded by you. So I didn't realize that the unhappiness was static. As long as, well, maybe it isn't static. Maybe it is per negative point. It's not specifically listed over here. But the -1 strength on all units per negative points is super noticeable at war. You really, really, really don't want to be fighting an opponent if you have massive negative war support. If they're, if the war support is 3 or 4 or 5 points on their side, you are definitely going to feel the pain trying to fight them. On the flip side, if the war support is massively on your side, the war will be much easier. That's one of the reasons that you're really going to want to avoid declaring a surprise war if you can manage it. It can be useful because surprise is pretty good, and you're going to catch the opponent with their units likely out of position, and maybe with not as many military units pre-built, for example, but they will get substantial war support in their favor, which will make the actual battles a lot harder for you. You're going to want to make sure to win decisively and quickly if you declare a surprise war. On the other hand, if you are hated with, if you and your opponent hate each other, you will instead declare a formal war, which doesn't do the same thing. There are certain nations that get automatic war support for them. There's also a wonderful wonder, yeah, okay, called the Gate of All Nations, I think it's called, which means that any war you get 1 war support automatically. It's an antiquity era wonder, but it does work throughout the entire game, and it is surprisingly good. Now, obviously, if you don't go to war, it doesn't do that much, but if you're going to do any warring throughout the game, it's actually very influential, and especially painful if your opponent has it. You can see how many units of each type by tapping the yield icons at the top of the screen and scrolling all the way down to unit expenses. So at the very top of the screen, if you click on, say, your gold or whatever, it opens up a screen that gives you a breakdown of where all these resources are coming from city to city, for example, which is somewhere I would still like to see some more sorting and some UI work. But yeah, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can see how many units of each type is at the bottom and how much they are costing you. I do visit this from time to time, and it is really handy, especially when I get to the end of an age and I want to count how many units I've got, so I know how many will be retained into the next stage. You must first gain control of every fortified district in a settlement before it can be conquered. So, with all the walls, for example. Some districts may not visually show fortifications, so you have to select the nearby army unit or hover over each tile to know where the fortifications are. I haven't actually noticed that problem yet. I've always been able to see the walls, but maybe there are situations where you don't. Conquered or traded cities will become towns until upgraded again, which cannot be done until the unrest of the settlement passes over. Conquering a settlement with a wonder will reportedly give you all the benefits of the wonder as if you've built it. For example, a settlement with terracotta army will grant you an army commander. I didn't know that. That's awesome. I mean, I knew that you were getting the passive bonuses from the wonder, but I didn't realize you'd get the one-shot bonus from the wonder as well. That's cool. I wonder if you keep flipping the city back and forth, if people keep generating 1,000,000 army commanders. Huh. Movement. Moving over flat terrain or any tile with a road will not affect the unit's movement. It costs you movement, it costs you 1, but a tile with a road will just cost you the normal amount. Without a road, all rough terrain, non-navigable rivers, and terrain with trees will deplete all of a unit's movement, regardless how many movement points it had left. That is a big change from previous versions of Civ, where usually what it was is like a wood or a hill would add 1 to the movement cost, and sometimes could stack the movement cost penalties. But this is important and it doesn't really come up much for units that only have movement of 2, but units with more movement will definitely feel that extra pain over here. Not all districts have a road, which is simply strange and inexplicable, may cause you to unintentionally waste your unit's movement. You'll have to hover over a district tile to see if it has a road. What I would also love is if the tooltip explicitly told us the movement cost, but I guess there's not a movement cost in this game. It's just either it costs 1 or it costs all. And it would be good to know. Although that could also vary depending on if the unit you have ignores rough terrain or not. Naval and embarked units can move over navigable rivers and coast tiles without their movement being affected, in addition to ocean tiles once shipbuilding is researched. So yeah, without shipbuilding, especially embarked units may not be able to enter ocean tiles at all, but usually it also turns into rough terrain, which means you can only traverse it 1 tile at a time. Embarking or disembarking will always deplete the unit's movement unless the unit's in range of an army commander with the amphibious skill in the maneuver tree. When a unit enters an ocean tile before shipbuilding is researched, its movement is depleted, and it takes any number of damage between 11 and 20. AI apparently takes slightly less damage from this. AI and especially in a big, full, complicated map like Civ happens, and trying to relocate units far away is not going to be as efficient as a human, and I'm perfectly fine with them taking slightly less damage here. Moving a unit onto a bridge built over a navigable river will remove its cost of embarking, although moving off the bridge will still deplete the unit's movement. Bridges built in previous ages lose this strange benefit. Scouts seem to be an exception to most movement rules, including embarking and disembarking. Their movement is not affected by anything other than non-navigable river tiles. I had noticed that scouts can, if there's a little bay, they can embark and then disembark on the other side as one smooth movement, which did surprise me. But I guess the way in Civ 7 they've coded it, that rather than, it seems like instead of like all these special cases of movement, it seems to be very simple. Either moving into a hex uses 1 point of movement, or it uses all of your movement, or your unit ignores that like a scout, in which case you just move normally over most things. Although it's interesting, it says non-navigable river tiles do affect scout movement, which actually does make sense and is odd. Okay, the palace building in the capital, this is something not listed anywhere in the Civilopedia or any tooltip, gains +1 science and +1 culture adjacency bonus for each adjacent quarter, right? Which is an urban district with 2 buildings. You notice this, let's say you build a building next to your palace. When you go and build another building, that tile next to the palace, the yield for that building will list an extra 1 science and extra 1 culture, and it is not anywhere clear where that comes from. But as it turns out, it's, a completed quarter next to the palace, which is just for your capital, not any city hall, but the palace specifically, gets +1 science and +1 culture. And this is an adjacency bonus, which does get boosted by specialists running in your palace. For a long time, I was deprioritizing adjacency buildings in a palace because I thought, well, I'll never be placing specialists in there. But the specialists would get this extra science and culture. However, recall that in the exploration age, the science legacy path, which requires you to ultimately get 5 tiles with 40 or more yield each, which is you achieve by having specialists with lots of adjacency bonuses, that excludes the city center, the city hall tile. So while this bonus is great and you can boost it with specialist stuff, it doesn't help you progress that specific legacy path. Unless I'm wrong about this, and misunderstood something, I believe that is the case. That doesn't mean the palace isn't still a great place to put specialists, especially maybe in the modern era where you're no longer hunting that particular bonus, or in the exploration age after you've already completed that bonus. Generally, food and gold buildings receive an adjacency bonus from navigable rivers and water tiles, production and science buildings from resources, and culture and happiness buildings from mountains and natural wonders. Constructed wonders grant adjacency bonuses to all buildings except for warehouse buildings. So those are a lot of your ageless buildings, your granaries, your sawmills, and things like that are your warehouse buildings, the city hall, and the palace. Without modifiers, each specialist costs 2 food and 2 happiness to maintain, and grants as a base 2 science and 2 culture, and plus 50% adjacency bonus of the buildings in the assigned district. Buildings will usually cost 2, 3, 4 happiness and 2, 3, 4 gold to maintain. I believe this is based on the age. Happiness and gold cost increases by 1 for each age based on when they were built. Happiness buildings do not have a happiness penalty, and gold buildings have no gold penalty. So happiness and gold buildings, just like the ones that generate influence, might be your lowest priority to overbuild in later ages. Warehouse buildings have no maintenance costs at all, but also have no adjacency bonuses. Buildings can be placed next to a finished wonder as if they were a district, as long as the wonder is adjacent to another district in the settlement. So the wonder sort of counts as a city district for spreading your buildings. Improvements. Work tiles not improved by districts are considered rural tiles. Each rural tile equals 1 rural population, and each building or specialist equals 1 urban population. There's currently no way to know the share of rural or urban population of a settlement other than counting every tile it has. This is annoying because there are certain things, there are religious reliquary benefits that give you relics when you convert cities with 10 urban or 10 rural population. And there is one of the civs, whose name I can't recall right now, has a bunch of bonuses in its civilization civic tree that takes place in settlements with 8 or more rural or urban population. And there's no easy way to count that and know how much you're benefiting from. Unique improvements, such as the Great Wall or Terrace Farm, as well as those from city-states, can only be built on rural tiles. These improvements will keep all yields of the work rural tile in addition to any other yields or bonuses the improvement itself provides. The tile also retains its warehouse bonus, such as +1 food from granary. Okay, so there's a lot of text here that maybe makes it unclear. if you have a unique improvement, like the pot cop, for example, which has its own bonus. The pot cop gives +1 gold and culture or something like that, right? The unique improvement gives you a little bit more. Well, that, and if you build it on top of, say, a farm, that tile, for all intents and purposes, still counts as a farm and still gets all the benefits that a farm would have in addition to whatever the unique improvement is doing. That's what this text is doing, is describing over here. Population loss due to damage will return when an effective tile or building is repaired. Each settlement can only claim a radius of up to 3 tiles from its center. There's currently no way to swap tiles between settlements. That is a little annoying, but also not totally unrealistic and unreasonable. If the settlement has no available tiles or districts to work on when it grows, a migrant will appear in the settlement. This migrant can be sent to another settlement to improve an unworked tile. There are also tons of different events and things that can generate some migrants as well. This is not the only way to get a migrant, but yeah, this means that when a city grows and if it doesn't have room for stuff, you don't lose that population. You simply get a unit of population that you can move elsewhere. The natural happiness of a tile is related to its hidden appeal, which is in some way affected to what's on the adjacent tiles. Floods and other natural disasters may also affect yields, but how exactly any natural yields are determined remains a complete mystery. That's great. I did wonder why some tiles had happiness on it and some didn't. I assumed it was some adjacencies I wasn't spotted, which I guess it sort of is, yeah. But so presumably, places next to, I don't know, mountains and forests have more natural happiness than deserts. Your religion. Your missionaries will only be able to spread your own religion, even if they create a settlement that follows another religion. It's in fact hard-coded in there. Whatever religion you happen to found, your missionaries will also always be of that religion. Holy cities cannot be converted to another religion, not even after being conquered, and not even after the founding civilization completely erased from history. Independent people cannot be converted to a religion until it becomes a city-state. So the villages don't have religions, but if anyone completely befriends a city-state or a village and it becomes a city-state, then it can be converted. The second and third founder beliefs of religion can only be unlocked via very rare random events, completely up to chance whether you will see these. Honestly, I would like to see this maybe tweaked a little bit. If a settlement has at any point been fully converted to a different religion, the rural population icon will appear in red. It means nothing else than that. It's very confusing if you don't know this. I was wondering what that meant, but at any point is a little bit weird. Like red highlighting, I like the idea of the red highlight if a settlement's current religion doesn't match your religion or doesn't match the religion of the owner of that settlement. That I like, and maybe to me this is a little bit bugged and incorrect. And I kind of wonder if that's the case and might get an adjustment, because right now it doesn't seem to have any purpose, that little red icon. Trade. You may only trade with foreign settlements that have at least one work resources. Okay. Distant land resource in the second age cannot be traded. Effects of all resources stack additively. So having 5 silver, for instance, grants you plus 100% gold bonus to purchasing units, effectively cutting costs in half. It is a little confusing that you don't have any resources that say they give you a discount. They don't lower the cost of purchasing a unit or building by 10%, for example. Instead, they say they give you a bonus to doing a thing. Same thing with like maintaining specialists, right? You get these civics that you can run that give you a food and gold bonus to maintaining, or food and happiness bonus to maintaining specialists, which is kind of odd. But I think it's because if these were discounts, let's say silver, let's say it was a 20% discount to purchasing units and you had 5 of them, then those units would be free. Negative percentages are kind of odd sometimes like that. So this way you can stack any number of silvers and it's still always giving you a bonus, but different. Yeah. So at 100%, what you're doing is you're halving the cost, because the gold you're putting towards buying a unit is effectively counting as double. So it halves the cost over here. And yeah, they do add up. This includes things like iron, for example, which gives you +1 combat strength for infantry units. Multiple irons do stack and is amazing. Resources can only be assigned to and from cities in range of your trading network. Building any naval building in a settlement will usually add the settlement to the trading network. Trading range may also be increased with a town specialized as a trade outpost, or by having a merchant manually connect 2 of your settlements. It's not clearly indicated at all why a settlement may not be connected. So you just have to try these things. I also want to note the naval buildings can also determine where built ships spawn. So you have to actually be careful about building them on a lake, because sometimes it means you can have naval units spawn in a lake instead of on an ocean tile. Resources cannot be reallocated between turns until new resources obtained, or the amount of resource slots in any of your settlements increased for whatever reason, such as building a market or slotting a certain policy card. Towns turn all their production into gold, all their hammers get turned into gold. Towns that are not set to growing town will additionally provide all of its food to each city in its range, causing the town itself to stop growing. This range appears to be shorter than the trading network range, but it's not known how short, which can be frustrating. As of yet, you can only use the town details, the list icon visible when you select the town, to see which your cities the food is sent to. Now, it is really important to note as well that this display, the town details display, doesn't get refreshed instantly. If you specialize a town, you focus a town into becoming, say, a farming town, so it's sending all of its food to a city, and then you click that list icon, it will not tell you that it's sending it to a city immediately. You have to close out of the settlement view completely, then reopen it, then click the town details button, and then it will tell you that it's sending its food to whatever city. Or at that point, it'll not show that it's sending its food anywhere, which tells you that it's not connected meaningfully to the trade network to any city. I'm assuming at some point that will no longer be an issue where it'll automatically refresh, but currently it doesn't auto refresh, so you have to close out of the settlement view completely and then reopen it for this display to update. Treasure fleets. Once you've researched shipbuilding, settlements in distant lands can produce treasure fleets. These settlements require a fishing key and must be working on any resource that mentions treasure fleets in its tooltip, such as sugar or tea. As far as I can tell, you can't tell from the icon itself whether something is a treasure fleet resource. You do have to mouse over it. You also need a fishing key in your capital or any other settlement on the home continent connected to the capital. That's very important information. I hadn't actually realized that you need this on both sides. I do tend to plop these down at a really high priority anywhere that's on the coast, so I hadn't actually noticed that this was a problem. You can see how many turns it takes to produce the next treasure fleet in the resource menu or in the details of a settlement, that list icon. Treasure fleets can be emptied within the borders of any of your settlements on your home continent, providing points in the economic legacy path equal to the amount of treasure fleet resources that the original settlement was working on. Factory resources. Factory resources, this is a modern age thing. Factory resources can only be worked in settlements with a factory. First, both the resources and the settlement must be connected to your capital via port or railroad, and the capital itself must also have a port or railroad. Factory resources are empire-wide, and you will receive 1 economic legacy point per turn for each factory resource. So this is the so-called Railroad Tycoon legacy thing, which you have to hit 500 points worth on the standard settings to complete that legacy path. So you get 1 point per turn for each factory resource. This is the big thing. You can only slot 1 type of factory resource for each settlement. So for example, coffee, for example, is a factory resource. So you can only slot 1 type. So you can't put both coffee and tea, assuming those are both factory resources, and I think they are. So you can only slot 1 of them at a time, but you can put multiple copies of it. This was not clear and obvious to me immediately. This is a huge deal. If you have, say, 5 copies of coffee, you can put all 5 copies in the same settlement with a factory to make it a super copy town. Without knowing this, I thought, wow, the economic legacy seems impossible to achieve in the modern era because it's such a slow trickle of these points. But realizing that you can put multiple copies of the same resource in a city with a factory, that opens it up hugely, massively. Artifacts. So this is artifacts are modern age. Never mind. Selecting an explorer will show an overlay of all known artifact spots. The shovels. The shovels are where you actually dig up artifacts. Explorers can be sent to any museum or university. These are the ones with the urn artifacts, the sort of vase, the pot, to discover all yet undiscovered artifact spots on the same continent as that building. These buildings are highlighted, there we go, with the vase icon. Note that the university can no longer be built in the modern age, although museums can. What's annoying is this vase icon remains even after you have done the research. That is frustrating. You have to mouse over the tooltip to find out if it's already been researched, in which case it's not valid anymore, or it can be researched, in which case you want to get an explorer over there to run the research. Or the third possibility is it hasn't been researched, but you don't yet have the, I think, hegemony tech. Oh yeah, the hegemony civic rather, over here to be able to do this research, right? Initially, only artifact spots from the exploration age are shown. You must study the hegemony civic before explorers can also discover artifact spots from the antiquity era. As soon as any player has revealed the artifacts on a continent, they become visible to all players. This is actually quite important. Even players without the hegemony civic can dig up antiquity artifacts once someone's discovered them. Okay, so yeah, you don't actually need to research hegemony yourself to be able to dig those up. Okay, that is interesting and important to know. Each civilization digging an artifact spot will receive one artifact when the digging is done. This is something we had confirmed in our most recent game. As long as you get there before the shovel icon goes away, you will get an artifact. As long as you start your dig, rather, I should say, before the shovel icon goes away, you will get an artifact. Does not seem to be a use for sending more than one explorer at the same spot, even though AI keeps doing so. The AI's explorer behavior seems to be bugged. It just sends like all of its explorers in one huge stack to do everything, even though it is not useful. That's an AI glitch. Artifacts are also randomly found when overbuilding. Oh yeah, that is cool. And then there's a few other ways to get some artifact through some events. And I think some of the technologies and or civics sometimes grant an artifact. It's actually pretty easy. You need, I think, 15 on the standard settings to complete the cultural legacy path. And it actually seems pretty easy to get that right now. Again, these balances, especially the modern age, I suspect will go through substantial balance changes. So we'll see how that goes. Legend unlocks, so we see these in the attribute trees, can only be selected once you reach a certain level with a leader by playing enough games with them. This means you have to spend a long time with one leader to fully unlock their potential. Reaching a higher level with a leader may also unlock mementos. So I can't remember all the levels. I think they get one at 2, 5, 9? No, I'm not sure about that. May also unlock mementos or more legacy options at the start of each age. Unlockables can be viewed in the leader progress menu at game creation. There's also like a main menu option that you can see a bunch of these things. There's currently no clear indication to what each available memento does in game other than hovering over each one individually at game creation. It has to be said, locking features behind a level-based system in the game where matches take plenty of hours. It was not anyone's wish list. No, I do like unlockables in game because it gives me incentive to play as all the different leaders, and it gives me, a little boost of endorphins at the end of a session when some things unlock. So part of me doesn't mind it, although the fact that some of this is gameplay related can be bad. Like if there's a particular powerful memento, then you're gonna have to grind a particular leader to unlock it. That can feel bad. If it was just more cosmetics and things like that, that doesn't feel so bad to me. But yeah, so I mean, there's pros and cons over here. I think there's already a mod to like unlock all these while you're running the mod. Okay, force ending turns. Force ending a turn is PC only mechanic. Also appeared in previous games, can be done with shift enter. Yeah, if let's say the game is prompting you to make a decision before you can end the turn, you can force your way past it with shift enter. Usually you're not going to want to do this anyway, because usually you want to do all the things you're supposed to do on a turn. Something frowned upon in multiplayer due to its exploitative nature allows you to skip everything that's left to do on your turn while saving up your unspent research, culture, and production. Oh, for instance, if the Civic for a Wonder takes 3 more turns to be studied, you could choose to not build anything in a certain city for 3 turns, therefore saving 3 turns on building the Wonder. Oh, it's letting you bank production as overflow by not producing anything. Huh, all right, interesting. Force ending turns can delay celebrations, several other choice events, including having to support an ally that goes to war. Won't avoid crisis. Crisis slots will automatically slot in, even if you don't try. Haven't tried it before. Okay, all right. I guess that's interesting, but not something I'm particularly going to be using, because it does feel quite cheesy. Other useful thing to know, not settling near fresh water on those cyan tiles, right? When you've got your settler overlay, the bluish tiles are the ones that have access to fresh water. We'll give the settlement a permanent -5 happiness penalty. It's pretty annoying, not the end of the world. And plenty of times I'm still going to settle where there isn't fresh water, but that is a pretty meaningful penalty to note. Using a settlement to claim a tile that has a goodie hut on it will not grant you a beneficial narrative event. Oh, you must walk a tile without any unit to trigger the event. Unlike in Civ, actually, unlike most previous versions of Civ. In most previous versions of Civ, if city borders expanded in such a way to pop a goodie hut, you got the bonus. And in fact, I think in something like Civ 4, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. In Civ 4, goodie huts could have negative effects like spawn barbarians. One of the bonuses that scouts have is they would ignore the negative effects. I think that popping a goodie hut from a border expansion also ignored the negative effects. But I mean, that's not relevant to Civ 7 anyway. Number of turns remaining until the next celebration is shown in overview tab of the social policies menu. So yeah, the social policies menu has 3 tabs at the top. It's got overview, social policies, and then the crisis tab, I suppose. And so yeah, that very first one, the overview, will show you your progress towards celebration and if it's running. Show more in the pause menu, quickly retire, exit the game. Okay. PC cutscenes at end of age can be skipped with the escape button. Yep. While espionage actions have a strong impact on the game, they also negatively affect your influence. If your espionage action is revealed, your influence per turn will drop for a while. If you're spying someone while they are counter-spying against you, your influence per turn will also greatly decrease, as the cost for finishing the espionage action against them will increase. Exact numbers are unknown. Questionable things that are likely bugs. Not being able to claim a tile that was previously owned by a now-destroyed city-state. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, sometimes there's sort of like a little ghost border that stays behind. Yep, okay. Not being able to generate treasure fleets in a settlement that meets all requirements. Told this issue is related to the fractal or shuffle map. Oh, that's interesting, because I was going to play on the fractal map next, because it actually looks really cool, but now I'm hesitating. The Dogo Ocean Wonder should not grant every civilization your Empire +1 population and celebration. It's a fun broken thing. Wow, okay. Rural tiles improved by unique improvement will occasionally lose a food or production, while all of its yields should have been kept. Oh. Army commanders with the merit commendation +1 command radius will still only receive experience from adjacent units. I had noticed that, and was a little bit disappointed by it. I wasn't sure, like, oh, maybe I just made a mistake and didn't spot something correctly. But okay, it's nice to see confirmation about this. We don't know if it's a bug. I feel like it probably is. The merit combination of +1 command radius is still really useful to extend the range at which the army commanders provide their bonuses, but maybe less valuable, because I had wondered if I should rush this one as my first commendation, because it would be easier to accrue experience on my army commanders. And I did do that in one of my games, and then I didn't seem to be getting experience from people who were within the command radius but weren't adjacent to my commander. So now I definitely go for the +5 combat strength commendation. And honestly, it's probably the right and strongest choice every time anyway to start with. I think the merit combination is still really good despite this. Whether or not this is a bug or intended, I think this is still perfectly fine. Perfectly a strong commendation, but maybe not the one to rush first. Naval units can normally attack at range, however, they're reportedly forced to engage in melee combat once they attack an embarked unit, occasionally as well when they attack another naval unit. Interesting. Reports of several unlocked legacy options sometimes not showing up at the start of the age. Interesting. Anyway, I'll have a link down to this down in the description box down below. There's probably tons of useful stuff in the comments that I haven't seen yet, that haven't been updated in main posts since this originally went live. Again, big shout out to JordiTK for making this post in the first place, and to everyone over on the Reddit that has contributed to this. It's really, really useful. This would have been lovely to have ahead of time. There's not a ton of stuff in here that I don't know now, but there was a lot of stuff in here that I didn't know before I started, posting some videos on YouTube or live streaming and having people clarify some stuff, because plenty of stuff in Civ 7 is unfortunately not very clear. Thanks a lot for watching, folks. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.